being there in Goa, enjoying this great conference with you. As you know, there's a lot of travel restrictions for the coronavirus spread nowadays. And while Antrich and the staff at Nolkan have been incredible and amazing in trying to get me there, in spite of all that, at the end, we had to give up. And this is very painful to me, as this is probably the first time in 20 years of speaking experience that I had to cancel an engagement. So I apologize for this, and I apologize for having to deliver my keynote from remote. What I wanted to talk with you about, and it's very difficult for me without looking you in the eyes, but I will try my best, is about a few thoughts I have about cyber physical systems and their security. But actually, the real lesson in here is a lesson about how I think we should communicate our research responsibly to the people around us. So, as you have probably noticed, because you are in front of the circus right now, cybersecurity is a circus. And when you go to the circus, you want to see the attractions. You want to see the attraction. You want to see the guys jumping over the rope. You want to see the guys eating fire. You want to see all of these attractions. And who are the attractions of the cybersecurity circus? We are the speakers, the one that can be there with you and the one that cannot. We are the attractions. When I think of the attraction of the cybersecurity circuits, I think of my friend Barnaby Jack making ATMs spit $100 bill on the floor of a Las Vegas casino. $100 bill, ATM, Las Vegas casino, boom. That's an attraction. That's something that the circus can cheer for. And my God, he was the master of the circus. So I remember you, Barnaby, even if you passed away untimely a number of years ago. There's Charlie Miller and Chris Balasek. You have all seen them doing their thing. In 2015, Charlie and Chris remotely drove a journalist and Greenberg off the road in a Jeep Cherokee. They actually managed to perform this hack from another state. So this was a brilliant demonstration of car vulnerability. It immediately kickstarted most of the cybersecurity effort in the automotive industry. And this amazing stunt hack had, however, an interesting thing for me. In 2010, I was sitting in one of the largest academic conferences in the world, at the IEEE Security and Privacy Conference in San Francisco, and a couple of scientists from UCSD, University of California, San Diego, did exactly the same thing. But nothing happened because there was no stunt hack and because there was no journalist involved. So stunt hacking, demonstrating a hack that is brilliant and spectacular in front of journalists, actually helps getting people interested in a specific subject. So it's actually pretty useful. And then there's other attractions. This is my colleague Federico Maggi demonstrating a specific part of our work on the cybersecurity of robots. So everyone in the circus is an attraction. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that our conferences actually reward attack research. And this is actually something that is easily explained, because we are hackers and we enjoy the beauty of many of those hacks. We enjoy their skills, we enjoy the ingenuity, we enjoy seeing them. To me, as an academic with an offensive security vocation, the hack is a proof. Just like for a mathematics colleague, a beautiful mathematical demonstration is a proof. Just like for, I don't know, somebody in literature, a brilliant new poem is a moment of revelation. And these moments of revelation, however, are now realized in front of the public. You may have realized that we are not in our hacker cruise on IRC anymore. We are in front of the top page news, of the front page news of journals. And this means that our impacts do not just, our findings do not just impact our friends, our colleagues, the people that are with us at our conferences, but they impact the public perception. And here's the thing, our conferences that now are so large, they were born to talk among us, but this is not what is happening anymore. And we need to keep that in mind. So let me use a few examples. And before I even start, let me share and let me stress that I am not using this research to say that this research is not good. This research is great. I'm just using it as an example of the impact on the media. So in 2012, Andrei Kostin, a colleague researcher from academia, showed a series of vulnerabilities in ADSB. ADSB is a protocol that is used in order to transmit information about air traffic. Now, I don't want to get into the technicalities, so aviation enthusiasts, please excuse me if I will oversimplify in the next few slides, but that's not the point of this keynote. So we may discuss air traffic control and aviation vulnerabilities together anytime we get together at a meeting sometime in the future. But basically, for everyone who doesn't know, ADSB is the protocol that you are using every time you're using Flight Radar 24 or another of the live tracking websites for planes. Now, this protocol is designed to be peer-to-peer. It's designed not to have a security control as to who is able to hear data from this protocol and to inject data into it. So it is vulnerable to attacks as a protocol, but it has been designed like that because the peer-to-peer value and the openness are absolutely more important to this specific protocol than any perceived vulnerability. Also, it is used only for systems that have humans in the loop. So there is a very low possibility of this protocol alone leading to lack of safety. However, when this research was published, it was published in Black Hat, so I would be partially responsible for selecting this talk. When this research was published, this is the media impact that it had. And this is by Andy Greenberg, a very respected senior journalist in our field. So it's not the usual case, oh, this journalist did not really understand. It's just the way it needs to be presented to the public. Next generation air traffic control, vulnerable to hackers spoofing planes out of thin air. Now, I have been a hacker for a long time, and I can assure you, I would be very, very happy to be able to spoof a plane out of thin air and get my spoofed plane and come to Goa to deliver my talk. But the reality is we cannot, and we cannot put into a crisis any of the systems that comprise air traffic control. The point is that in the cybersecurity circus, the crowds are cheering for the lions. They don't want to see the tame lion. They don't want to hear about all the limitations of the attack. They want to hear about the attack. So when Ugo Teso, who's a cybersecurity expert that has worked a lot on planes, he was at F-Secure working specifically on this, and then he moved on to being, I think, the cybersecurity lead at Emirates. So he published a paper on aircraft hacking in 2013, Tech in the Box. And in his presentation, he used the ADSB first to single out a plane, and then he showed how to attack a flight management system that is a unit that is used on board planes to input to do a number of things, but in particular to input the data for the flight plan. That he bought on eBay. Now, I don't know how possibly there was an FMS on sale on eBay, but the core of the contribution was him exploiting this FMS. And then he showed through a simulator how this could affect a plane. Now, the main thing here is that this contribution was absolutely correct in the FMS exploitation part, but it actually was so widely exaggerated on the media. I will show a couple of examples in the next couple of slides, that the FAA had to take the unusual step of actually having to respond and to debunk it publicly, because it was presented like this. And this is Darlene Storm. She is just as good as a journalist reporting on security as Andy. Hacker uses an Android to remotely attack and hijack an airplane. That's totally not what happened on stage. That's totally not the point of Hugo's talk. He didn't use an Android because it was used only to show the ADSB targeting, so it had nothing to do with the hack. And it couldn't remotely attack and hijack an airplane. Now, the issue here is not that much with the misrepresentation of the research, as it is with the fact that you are probably well aware, also because of regional proximity, of the tragedy of the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines 380. Flight 380 disappeared in nothing in the night a few years ago, and it has never been found. And now we do have a very good theory about what happened to that airplane, but there's also a lot of crazy conspiracy theory about that. One of the conspiracy theories is that the plane was remotely hijacked through a cyber attack. And this theory is completely wrong, but it's based on wrong reports, misleading reports like this one. And just in case you are wondering, this is not just a problem with American press. This is an Italian newspaper having exactly the same title: the hacker that wanted to hijack an aircraft with a smartphone and a small app. This is totally not what happened. Now, the list on these hacks goes on and on. Sometimes with less, shall I say, appropriately performed research. So this is an example. A few years ago, hacker known as SiteDragon in the US tweeted that he had violated the network of the aircraft that he was on, and later even claimed that he could manage to get the plane to swing to the right by manipulating the controls. Now, to be blunt, this is impossible. So there's absolutely no way that this could have happened. What indeed happened was that he was picked up by the FBI at the landing of the plane and questioned, and actually there was a little bit of legal process going on for him. But he didn't. However, these also produced the impact in the public that did not follow the story through to its conclusion, but did only read the first news items, that airplanes can be controlled from the PAX cabin, which is very much not the case. And the list can go on, and the final example that I have, that I will be using also later, is that last summer at Black Hat, Ruben Santamarta showed a series of vulnerabilities in software that runs, or that purportedly runs, on a 787, on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner systems. This software was found on a server, on an unprotected server on the network, and analyzed in absence of the actual plane. So the important thing here is not the fact that the software had or did not have vulnerabilities, but the point is whether or not these vulnerabilities are exploitable and if they can lead to any compromise of the aircraft systems. Now, if you look at the slide, I don't know how big it is, so I will read it out for you. There's this phrase that I put in bold. Santamarta himself admits that he does not have a full enough picture of the aircraft or access to a $250 million jet to confirm his claims. Well, now, here's the thing. If you cannot confirm your claims because you don't have access to the cyber physical system that you are supposed to hack into, well, maybe you don't have claims. Maybe you should just either find a way to confirm them, or, you can't do that research. We were among the first to do research on industrial robots security. I will talk about that later. And the core reason was we had a robot. I had to ask nicely to my colleagues that are working on robots to let me hack into it. But we had the robot. Without the robot, we would have had no research. So why am I focusing on cyber physical systems specifically? Well, I am focusing on cyber physical systems because they are different from other systems. First of all, they are systems that people see and can immediately perceive as relevant. Politicians, for instance, have been talking about the possibility of break-ins into cyber physical system for years. The possibility of trains not working, of transportation systems stopping, of water distribution or electrical distribution stopping, of attacks to healthcare system is easy to understand. It's a problem that is easy to raise. And as much as an attack on a financial system that steals money is maybe as devastating economically, the fact is that these systems actually affect people's life, sometimes in a very, very specific, in a very, very straightforward manner. Sometimes these systems have safety constraints that involve literal danger for human life. For instance, industrial robots used to be like the ones that you see in the picture. They used to be isolated in their protected space, and they used to be configured in such a way that if a human enters the cage, enters that protected space, the robot immediately stops. And there is an electrical relay on the cage that once the relay is opened, pulls power from the motor and puts on all the brakes that the robot has. So if you open the cage, these robots immediately should immediately stop. And this is an electrical connection. You can hack all the way into those robots and their controllers. And even if you hack into them, the moment that someone opens the cage, the robots will stop, so the person will not be harmed. Now, In modern robots, however, some of the robots are cooperative robots. In the picture, there is Yumi, that is one of the first robots of this kind. And Yumi is designed to work alongside with humans. Now, it is literally built to be safe. In the case Yumi hits against anything, be it a human or a part of the environment, Yumi immediately stops. However, Yumi does so through a mechanism called proprioception. The robot knows how much energy it put into a motor, and it knows where the joint should reach at. If there is a discrepancy between how much energy it put into a motor and how much the joint moved, it means that there is a resistance, and so the robot stops. But all this computation is done through sensors, actuators, and software. So if you can hack into Yumi, you can actually take away some of these protections, something that you couldn't do with his older brothers here. So the systems that are being the systems that are cyber-physical in nature are more and more reliant on software for safety constraint, and they are also more and more reliant on automation. Automation means that sooner or later we will be stepping into taxis that do not have a steering wheel or a taxi driver. Now, this may look like science fiction as hell, and probably it's still a few years down the road, but there's a lot of smart brains working on exactly this concept right now, and they will probably manage. So the point is, would you feel safe entering that vehicle? Well, since we are in a world where most people kind of expect computers not to work correctly, and the people that expect that the most is us, you probably wouldn't. You wouldn't feel safe. You wouldn't feel like completely giving up control to a machine that brings you somewhere else. And the fear of complete automation has always been there with us. I don't know if you remember, like I do, we've loved this film. This is War Games. So for many hackers of my generation, this was literally the first time we saw a hacker on screen. And it inspired many of us into wanting to do this in the first place. However, as much as I love it for that, War Games is not about hacking. War Game is about fear of automation. The core of the film is humans have given an AI the control of a nuclear arsenal. That's what creates the fear. That's what creates the story of the film. People always had a fear of automation. When people are afraid of flying, they are not actually scared of the heights. They're afraid of flying because they are afraid of giving up control. They are afraid of being on a machine that they have absolutely no control over, and where they cannot help themselves if anything happens. So the problem is that since we have all of these things, automation, safety control, safety critical operations, and an evident impact on human life, for cyber-physical systems first and foremost, but in general for cybersecurity, now that our field is so important for society, we cannot just keep the circus going. Stunt hacks have been important. They raised awareness and open up discussion in the industry, but they focus on specific vulnerabilities. And focusing on specific vulnerabilities does not actually help. Now, this is an abstract, a small abstract from the talk by Dan Geer, the keynote that Dan Geer gave at Black Hat in 2014. Now, if you have an hour to spare, this is probably the best talk that you can go and watch. It is so dense, you will need to listen to it a number of times if you want to take it all in. But one of the points of this talk was that vulnerabilities matter only if they are sparse, if there's a few of them throughout software. In that case, every vulnerability you find and you fix lowers meaningfully the number of total vulnerabilities. So by squashing vulnerabilities one by one, you make an impact, you make a dent. But if vulnerabilities are dense and they are introduced constantly, then finding the one is essentially irrelevant and a waste of resources. Of course, if we find one, we should fix that immediately. But going out of our way to find one does not actually help. What does help? We are not going to solve security just by squashing vulnerabilities one at a time. So how do we try to solve the security problem of cyber-physical systems, if not by squashing vulnerabilities? Now, this is not really a new question. We already know the answer. For instance, in kernel security, there is the awesome work done by Brett Spangler and the GR security team to fix the security issues with the Linux kernel. And their work is the evidence that bugs do not really matter. Single bugs do not really matter. You are not going to stop exploitation. You are not going to. If you care about security, and these are the words by Bas Alberts, who was one of the best kernel hackers out there, you don't chase down vulnerabilities one by one. You design a system that fundamentally stops the route that an attacker can take to impact it. It's containment. Containment is the name of the game. And you know what? This is one thing that we can do very successfully with cyber-physical systems. Because we need to deny goals to the attackers, as we will see in a few slides. And that's actually even easier to do than on non-cyber-physical systems. However, often, if you do vulnerability research, if you do offensive research, you lack the systemic understanding, the systemic context of what you are attacking. And let me go back to what I found so disconcerting about the 787 research: the lack of awareness of the surrounding. If you don't understand the whole system, and there's very few people that can understand a system as complex as an airplane, you cannot do meaningful vulnerability research on it, period. So I have rambled enough about the problem, and you probably would expect me to offer a solution. I'm an academic, so I find problems. I do not find solutions. Or as a good friend of mine was saying about a PhD, I'm a doctor, just not the kind of doctor that helps people. So I don't believe I do have a solution, but I definitely have a couple of suggestions. The first suggestion is the one that I just stated. We need to think systemically and not of a specific vuln. So in order to bash some research, let me use my own research so I don't have to feel too bad about it. This is research that we presented a couple of years ago at Black Hat in Las Vegas. Breaking the laws of robotics. It was a paper about, the first paper, I think, about examining the cybersecurity of industrial robots. And it was a good paper, mostly authored by my wonderful former students, Davide Quarta, who is now at Qualcomm, Marcello Pogliani, who's graduating in 2 weeks from now, and Mario Polino, who's a postdoc at Politecnico, Federico Maggi, who is now a researcher with Trend Micro, and with my current colleague Andrea Zanchettin, who is a professor of robotics. So we presented this, and this is what the circus cheered for. We said, okay, so we looked at the robot, it actually downloads software without co-signing, without authentication, on an unsecure FTP every time it boots. Woohoo! The circus cheered for this. The robot is auto-configured. There's this file, you tamper with it, you can execute operations. Woohoo! Cheers from the circus. We showed that there are literal textbook buffer overflows in the code of the robot, that you can find an exploit like if it was 1997, because it's actually exploitable on the stack, because robots, like most control systems, do not have in-depth protection. So there's no stack randomization, there's no memory randomization, there's no stack protection, nothing. Woohoo! Circus cheers. What was the press impact? We had catastrophe warning, watch an industrial robot get hacked. We had watch hackers, that's us, sabotage an industrial robot arm. And my favorite, top favorite, hackers are remotely controlling industrial robots now. So the public perception was that we somehow had created this Skynet of hacked industrial robot, whereas instead, the actually important parts of the paper were the other parts. Exploitation was not the subject. The parts that we were interested into were post-exploitation strategies. What would people want to do with that robot? How to close off those goals? How to deny the goals to the attacker? How to create architectural changes that would improve resilience? That's the first thing. We need to shift the focus to preventing attacker goals. Then there's another thing. We need to embed the security and in the design process, because we have had all sorts of attacks on cars since Charlie and Chris hacked into the Jeep. But all those attacks are really the same attack over and over again. You find a vulnerability in a system that is on the frontier, either wireless or wired, of the vehicle. You get access to the controller area network, that is the bus that the vehicle uses. And then, since this bus is a trusted element, you can perform a message forgery and perform actions that will lead to the vehicle theft, to influence on the vehicle operation, and so on and so forth. All these attacks are the same. And here I have one of the worst examples of defense circus, because if you think that the red team is a security circus, the blue team is often worse. Now, FCA sent to every owner of the Jeep a USB key in the post, telling them to slam it into the dashboard and let the car update itself. Now, think about it for a moment. This is training people to put USB keys that they receive from an untrusted origin in their cars and have them update themselves. And this would fix that one specific vulnerability that was found by Chris and Charlie. Has this fixed anything systemically? No, of course not. The issue, the systemic issue of vehicles, is that CAN is a trusted network. There is a lot of research trying to change this, but this is actually very impractical. You go to in front of if you're in front of an automotive engineer and say, okay, we need to rip out the can and swap it with these other magical things, yes, I'm getting messages that I'm going on my time, and I will conclude in a minute. You tell the researcher that you want to rip out a can. That's not going to happen. Then there's people coming with their magic IDSs, intrusion detection system, and you know what? I was designing intrusion detection systems based on machine learning in 2006. way before this became an habit. And I can tell you, they didn't work back then, they do not work right now, they will never work in the future as they should on a car. So we cannot squash bugs, we cannot detect the intrusions, we cannot rip out the can. The only thing that we can do is redesign the vehicle network so that we can deny the attacker's goals. So in conclusion, so that I don't get stopped forcibly from projecting, we focus way too much on attack research. We focus way too much on vulnerability exploitation, and vulnerabilities do not matter. And I do not say this lightly, because I am an offensive security person. So I like it. I love it as much as everyone else. But it distracts us from the actual goals of security, that in the case of cyber physical systems are structural resilience, architectural changes, impact reduction. Now, I think I have time to take a question or two or whatever, but if you want, you can reach me at stefano.zanero@polimi.it, or just tweet at me at Raistula, and I will be happy to entertain a discussion that I cannot have in person with you right now. Thank you very much for listening to my talk, and I hope I can take a question or so.
Any question? Hello, any questions?
Good morning. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
My name is Brian Pereira, and I'm the editor from CISO Mag, EC Council. I have a question for you regarding the airplane systems. You mentioned that it's important to be aware of the system in order to find out the vulnerability, right? But in the case of an airplane system, that's a very specific domain knowledge. It requires training in aeronautical engineering and understanding the all the the electronics in the aviation bay, the aviatronics. How is it possible for a penetration tester to get all that knowledge? Because these manuals are not easily available. You'll have to actually talk to pilots, talk to engineers to get that kind of knowledge to understand those systems, which are very intricate. So how is it really going to be possible?
That's a very good question. And the answer is pretty much the same way they design airplanes. No one knows everything about an airplane. Not a single person knows everything about an airplane. You do it in teams. I know that it sounds like a very obvious, very simple answer, but that's exactly how we do it. The point is, if you are doing penetration testing on components of an airplane or on an airplane as a whole, one, you need to have a lot of training yourself to understand the generic way an airplane system operates among themselves. And two, you need to have those people, to talk with those people, to be sitting in the same room. When they have an issue with an airplane, they convene a number of people that represent the different components of the airplane and have these people talk to each other, trying to find out what is the interaction there that is causing the issue. That's exactly the same thing that you need to do as a penetration tester. And if the next question is, how do I do this as an independent person who wants to test the security of an airplane? Well, unfortunately, the answer is you don't. There is people that are penetration testing airplanes. For instance, my very good friend and exceptional speaker, Andrea Barisani, and they are doing it this way. And the reality is that this is the only way you can do it. As an external person, you will never be able to actually perform research in that area and not be wrong. You can be very right about the exploitation, but the context is always going to escape you unless you work directly with the manufacturer of the plane.
So what you're saying is that as an independent penetration tester from outside the industry, I need to work with a specialist from the aviation industry, preferably from the manufacturer like Boeing, to get the penetration done and understand the intricacies of the system. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, that's precisely what I am saying. The thing is, some cyber-physical systems cannot be independently tested in the same way that we independently test software. Because the reason why we can independently test software, for instance, I don't know, HTTP server of some sort, is that we can get it. We can get it physically, like installed in a machine, and we can get it, we can understand it, we can understand all of it. We can understand its intricacies because it's just software. But a cyber-physical system is primarily the physical system. So unless it is very simple, you cannot really get it. If you are testing like an IoT device, you can understand what it's supposed to do. But when we tested a robot, we couldn't have done it meaningfully without a real robot expert in the team and without the robot.
Any other question?
Hi, this is Razeen. I'm a developer in ThoughtWorks. So my question is, security is always on a different side of a axis than compared to the ease. As you were saying that I have personally worked on ATC and we were trying to automate few things. And as you said that this involves most of the human interactions, and that's why the probability of attack is less. But to be very frank, being in the industry, I see the perception changing. Even when the human security is concerned, like air traffic controller, people are still trying to reduce the human interaction and trying to automate as much as possible. And the reason behind that every human being doesn't want to do a repeated work. So they want to automate as much as possible. The more you automate, the more chances of being software there, and the more chances of being vulnerability there, the more chances of being hacked there. So it's my personal experience, but you are in the industry for a long time. Do you also see the perception changing from what you have presented in the slides, that wherever there is a physical human security is concerned, still people are not automating? Or do you see the perception is changing and people are starting to automate it and then putting security at risk for a human?
I think you're very right. And as a society, we are increasingly depending on automation. To be honest, this is on many levels a good thing. Automated systems on aircraft have saved a lot of lives over the years. However, there's two catches to that. On the one hand, when you automate a system, you somehow detract from the ability of humans to understand and correct errors. This has been tragically evident in some aircraft crashes, without assigning any sorts of blame, because it's not a blame game. But for instance, the 737 MAX incidents were caused by a hidden over-engineering of a control. So even without taking cybersecurity into account, automation has its challenges in being performed correctly. If you put in cybersecurity, I totally agree with you. The moment we automate something and we take a human out of the loop, we increase the possible impact of a vulnerability, because of course there's nobody there to try to steer the system back into a stable condition. So I totally agree that there is a push about this. We as an industry, we as security people are not going to stop that push. So what we need to do is to figure out ways to make that push compatible with the level of assurance that we can give on specific systems. At the moment, it's probably still a very risky proposition, the one that we are trying to take. Also because if you automate something at scale, you automatically change the threat profile. If there are single self-driving cars on the road, hacking into them is not as interesting as if there is a fleet of tens of thousands of them. So that also, that level of automation also scales up not just the possible impact of vulnerabilities, but also opens up the stage to new types of threats.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge with us. It was pleasure listening to you. Now it's a quick
Thank you very much for having me, and sorry again for not being there physically.
A big round of applause for Mr. Stefano Zanero. Thank you, sir.